First of all, we have to claim that our approach is basically a fine-tuning of already existing approaches, namely the automatic identification of dramatic genres, in this case comedies and tragedies, based on their structural properties. So this is the task, and the question arises that what do we mean by structure and what kind of features do we analyze? And first of all, it's important that we focused entirely on asemantic features of the text, which means that we have not dealt with the content of the text or the meaning of the words or any other topical issues, which is important because traditionally in literary studies, the differences between comedies and tragedies are drawn back to the topics. But the question here is that beside these topical differences, which surely exist, are there any structural ones? And instead of the semantic of the text, we focused on the arrangement of the characters or the relationships between the characters in the broadest sense, which means that we can have different point of views to describe the arrangements of the characters or the relationships between them. The first is the character networks of the dramas. I'm sure you're familiar with the concept that every drama could be visualized as a network where the nodes are the characters and there's an edge between them if they occur in the same scene at least once. And in a weighted graph or in a weighted network, also the number of the common scenes counts. And earlier attempts focused exclusively or almost exclusively on the character networks of the text to answer the question, but they gave different interpretations that what we can see in these networks. For example, Frank Fischer and researchers of the Drama Corpus project argued that we can have an access to the literary form or the dramatic form through these networks, while Franco Moretti in his famous analysis claimed that we can see the plot in these networks at once compared to the process of reading a text or watching a performance, which is necessarily unfolds in time. And there's a certain interpretation that every drama mirrors a kind of social world or a type of community, and through the networks we can get access to the analysis of this network, this social world, and that's why the methodology of the SNA, the social network analysis, could be used in these cases. But I think that these concepts are interrelated concepts, and we didn't want to handle them separately or choose one as a conceptual background. And that's why we use the word structure, which could include all these previous approaches, and also other approaches that try to describe the relationship between the characters in this from this other perspective. The distribution of different things is important, like the distribution of speech acts between the characters or the distribution of time spent on the stage, and from this point of view, these ratios tell us something about the relationship about the characters, and our notion structure refers both point of view. Okay, let's see two quick examples about networks. Every data was downloaded from the Drama Corpus project website, and we visualized the networks in Gephi. And to reflect to the keynote presentation from yesterday, here the curved edges are just because of the aesthetics and has no meaning, so we have to admit that. This is Shakespeare, Henry V, and this is also from Shakespeare, The Comedy of Errors. This is a comedy and this is a tragedy, and here we can see a chain-like arrangement of the characters where there are some important hubs who connect the different subgroups of the network, and the diameter of the network is pretty long. While the comedy of errors has a much denser, much denser network with a dense center with the main characters, and the peripheral characters are on the periphery on this network. And the question is that are these differences between these two networks are because of the genre? So this is a tragedy-like arrangement, and this is a comedy-like arrangement. Or we can formulate also the hypothesis that there is an effect of the genre on the structure of the text before or beside the individual consideration of the authors. And to answer or to test this hypothesis, there were several attempts before, and we wanted to, as I said, fine-tune these approaches. First, we analyzed a much bigger corpus than before. Usually, the Shakespeare corpus was used, 37 dramas, to answer these questions. We also used that corpus because we wanted to test that whether our model works on a small sample size too. And we also wanted to draw our results back to the interpretation of individual texts or the literary history, and the smaller corpus was easier to do that in a smaller corpus. But we also used a bigger corpora, the German subcorpus of the drama corpus project, and from that subcorpus the dramas which are either comedies or tragedies, and which have more than 5 characters and 2 scenes, because otherwise the character networks are not so meaningful. Fine-tuning number 2, we created new features to do the classification, which means we supplemented the, let's say, traditional metrics from graph theory, like average clustering coefficient, density, diameter, and maximum betweenness, with new features, like the high speech, medium speech, low speech, or high weighted degree, medium weighted degree, low weighted degree. We calculated these metrics in several steps. First, we grouped the characters based on the speech acts or based on the number of the weighted degree from the networks with the K and N classification algorithm into 3 groups. So in this case, K equals 3. Then we ordered the 3 nearest neighbor groups, and according to the median values. So we got the group with the highest values, the medium scores, and the low scores. And then we checked the percentage of the characters from each group compared to the whole cast, so the whole number of speakers in the dramas. And in this way, we got a number that this can describe the whole drama, and also comparable to other dramas with different cast size or different numbers of characters. And we also used other features like average character speech, average characters in a scene, and the maximum degree divided by all other characters, which can show us that the character who has the most connections, how many characters do they reach from the whole cast in the drama. We also checked the correlation between these features. Or to tell the truth, we had other features, but we excluded the ones who correlated very strongly with other features, or the ones which correlated very strongly with the number of speakers. And we also excluded the metrics of number of speakers, because earlier attempts relied heavily on this metrics or this feature, and I think that this is not so informative about the structure of the dramas. It's just a mere number of the size of the networks or the size of the cast, but nothing tells us about the relationships. I go on. We also check the differences between comedies and tragedies in the remaining features. You can see the box plots here, and we also checked whether these differences are statistically significant or not. We used the Wilcoxon test, because our data was not distributed normally. That's why we didn't use the t-tests or something like this. And according to the Wilcoxon test, these differences are statistically significant instead of except of the median weighted degree, which is also visible that there's not a big difference between comedies and tragedies in this feature. Then, after all, we use the machine learning classification process. We use the support vector machine classification procedure in a leave one out scenario. So we always left one drama out from the training set, and after running the model, we evaluated the success of predicting the genre of the text left out, and you can see the results up there with fairly good F1 scores, which indicates that there is something, there is a structural difference according to genre, because the classification works pretty well, but of course it's not perfect, and we can say that it's this determination it's exclusive in this sense, which is also visible in this PCA plot, where we try to map the group. This is about the German subcorpus, the comedies and tragedies, whether in the two-dimensional space it's also distinguishable, these genres, and in this case not so much, but maybe there's a tendency that in the right side there are more tragedies and the left more comedies, but there's no clear distinction here. But in the case of the Shakespearean corpus, there is a difference. In the right, there's the comedies, and left the tragedies. And we can also, that's why we like to use the PCA plot, because as loadings, we can also plot the effect of the different features on the positions of the data points, the dramas in this place. And these figures also can serve as a starting point to individual interpretations of the text. For us, the most interesting were the cases when tragedies like the King Lear or Othello is near to the comedy-like structure, but they are obviously tragedies, and why does it happen, and how can we use this information in the interpretation of the text? It was quite interesting to us, but unfortunately here I won't go into the details. But I want to wrap up the results based on the SVM model and also the PCA plots, that comedies tends to have dense character networks and scenes with multiple characters, more characters who appear with many other characters in the same scene, and who talk a lot through the play. The character connected with the highest number of characters can be linked with a high percentage of the entire cast. While tragedies have more characters who speak little and appear with few other characters in the same scene, the length of the utterances per person is longer, which means there are more monologues. There, the diameter of the networks is larger, and there are one or two characters with a special connecting function, connecting the different subgroups of the networks with high maximum betweenness scores. And an even maybe higher level of interpretation or conclusion of the results, we can say that in comedies, there are fewer characters who control the flow of information or talk nobody more than their peers or have significantly more connections than others, which is important because in such connections there are multiple pieces of information circulating at the same time through the network, which on the one hand results constant misunderstandings because there are parallel ways of the flowing of information. Maybe that's also a source of comical situations. But on the other hand, it prevents the networks from from falling apart if one information or one truth is proved to be wrong or bad or something like this, because there are other channels that can prevent the network from falling apart. While in the contrary, in tragedies, one or two key figures control this flow of informations because they act as link between subgroups, which results in a much more effective way of communication. They can sometimes reach their goals, but these networks are more fragile, and after failing these, the failure of these characters or the failure of their truth, the network can fall apart, and that's the risk of such networks. And we think about these results as not as not the very exact description of what comedies and tragedies are, because as we saw in this piece here plot, that sometimes there's no very strict distinction between the categories, and we want to propose a prototype-based way of thinking in such cases, because as we see that in the DH, the classification procedures are always tries to be as accurate as they can be, which is, of course, we also try to be as accurate as we can be, but in some cases there are fuzzy boundaries between the groups, and the task here is to point out to the prototypes and the prototypical features of the prototypes, and maybe not, the aim is not to distinct the two categories very sharply, but to think of these results as prototypes. And there are some dramas or texts which could be described as prototypical ones, and there are some, let's say, peripheral ones, as also here in this plot. The first two dramas, there was the Henry V in the left side, so we can say it is, according to these features, a prototypical tragedy, or has the structure of a prototypical tragedy, and the comedy of error on the contrary is on the right side, so it can be also a prototype, while there are some other cases where they are not prototypical members of the groups. And I just want to just in 1 minute that it could be also a fine-tuning of the research, that the question is that whether these differences between the structures are just because of the ending of the stories. There's this famous distinctions that the comedies always have a wedding where everybody is there, and it makes the networks much denser, and in the ending of the tragedies, everybody dies after each other, and there is there is no such a big scene where everybody meets like in a wedding, and we also check that how affects the last act on the results, or in this case we checked first the effect of the last acts on density, and we can claim that it has a positive effect on the comedies and a negative effect on the tragedies. So there is a connection between the development of the plot and these structural properties and networks, at least in density. But the difference between the two genres remains significant without the last act 2. So that's also important to keep in mind. And that's all for now. Thank you very much for your attention.